September 11th, the 20th year anniversary of 9/11. Wow. I was 3 hours into a heavy dose of Ibogaine. So if anybody knows what Ibogaine is, it's the strongest psychedelic on earth. After that, it was on a Friday night. I came out of it Saturday. And then on the Sunday, we do 5-MeO-DMT, which is the venom of a toad. They crystallize it, you smoke it, and this thing takes you into, they call it the God molecule, right, as you guys know. And I guess if I had to summarize that weekend, it would be I was gutted by the devil or a demon and spent a day with God. But that has probably been the single most thing that has done the most for me. Yeah, my patterns, drinking and nightmares, all that stuff, that's over.
Welcome back to the Medicin podcast. My name is Mimi, and to my right here, I have my favorite person in the world, my partner, my co-pilot, Chase.
What is going on, everybody? We are stoked today. We got Ed Hiner on the podcast, and we're going to get into some topics that we really haven't talked a whole lot about on the Medicin before. So we are welcoming you, my friend Ed. Welcome to the Medicin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
It's going to be good. Well, we'll get started. We have a ton of questions for you today in your very unique line of work and background. But the first question that we ask every guest on the Medicin is, what do you love in your life? What aspect of your life do you love so much that you wish you could gift it to every human?
Which is a very tough question, by the way. Anyone that listens to this, when you're listening and go, okay, what would I answer to that? But I think probably just the gut reaction to me would be, it's a strange play on words, but the privilege of poverty, perspective, okay? And it kind of, you grow up, and I did. I grew up in poverty and grew up in a very tough situation. But to have that perspective on life, I think is good. I wish it on a lot of people. We're born into the birth lottery of the world. You don't know where you're going to be born at, sick, healthy, rich, poor, whatever the case. But that perspective on life has always done me well, because I've been able to be very happy where I'm at every time I've been there, so to speak. Some people aren't. And I think that comes with understanding you have enough. And but that perspective, privilege of poverty, actually might be one of the titles of one of my next two books.
Wow, I love that. Yeah. And resonates deeply. Like, we went through a divorce in our relationship, and having that context of what it's like to be at rock bottom from a relationship standpoint, now in our second attempt at this relationship, is been the ultimate friend to reconnection and making sure that we're doing the right things, because you have this context, that perspective of poverty in the relationship sense, always being right there and reminding you of what it could be if you don't so choose to be abundant and make the right choices. So I love that response.
Yeah. What is it? I want to pull on that thread a little bit. I think we can grasp some idea of what you mean by that, but is it the gratitude piece? What exactly about the poverty perspective is helpful to you now in your life? Is it the gratitude piece, or what is it exactly about that?
I would say gratitude is a piece of it, right? Understanding you have enough. That's something hard for a lot of people to get in life, is to have enough, right? Of whatever it is in life. But the gratitude and always being able to balance it off where you're at part in your life. Success, failures, whatever it is. I live in La Jolla, California. We have a beautiful family, healthy. I can't think of it. I mean, I'm pretty good to go. No matter where I go from this point on, I've come a long ways, and it's always good to reflect back. Anytime that you don't feel that you've come far enough is where you're at, where you came from. And a lot of people don't have that. It's a Cinderella story. Everybody loves a Cinderella story, and not everyone has that perspective to really be grateful for that story.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, let's unpack this a little bit. We're already teasing your background a bit, and maybe we can briefly give a little context to the listener as to what you do in the world today. We'll come back to that, of course, later in the conversation, but a little bit about what you do in the world today, and then we can start unpacking a little bit of your story.
Well, let's see. I'm a writer. That's one of the things I do. I'm 2 books, one bestseller. The other one didn't quite make it, but it's doing pretty well. I started off had a leadership company, still do. Don't do as much of that. I'm a professional speaker, but one of the coolest things I've done, 2019, I started with a partner, a leader, an education company for kids in the foster youth juvenile court system. That's our original target. We also work with kids, underserved kids, kids of color in the hardest hit neighborhoods. And we've been very successful as far as getting the program dialed in to meet the needs of the kids. So that's one of our passions. One of our things we're doing is taking a lot of the leadership, mental toughness stuff that I came from my life and putting it in a classroom for some of these kids that understand, hopefully in 10, 20 years from now, they understand the privilege of that poverty that they had.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you, in your work in the leadership program and education system, do you speak directly to that poverty perspective and how it could potentially benefit them later in life?
100%. It's upfront. When we're teaching, my partner and I are both, we're not young kids anymore, but we're both OWGs, right? We call these kids, they're like, what does that mean? It's like, we're old white guys. Of course, they love that. and my partner came up, I was in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia in a trailer. My parents are gone before I was 12. I lived with a grandmother that was 7th grade educated, first person, high school, graduate, college, all those things. My partner's same story, except he was in the projects in New York.
Wow.
And he ended up going to Wall Street. By the time he's 25 years old, he got a full ride to Syracuse and broke poverty, went to Wall Street, made enough money at 25. So the last 35 years, he's been entrepreneuring and helping kids in different homeless kids and different ventures for schools.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Incredible.
So yeah, let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
Would love to hear about your upbringing, this poverty that you've so described, and then ultimately what led you into the military.
Yeah, well, I was in Blue Ridge Mountains, Virginia, which is the middle of nowhere. I grew up, my parents are gone when I was 12. Basically, my dad was gone most of my life. I grew up with my mother some. She had a nervous breakdown, left. She's gone on her own for a long time. And I lived with my grandmother, older lady. She's actually born in 1915. She passed away since. But yeah, I kind of grew up hard, tough. My brother and I at the time were both pretty gifted athletes. I'm getting a scholarship, baseball Division I scholarship, which really kind of helped save my life. I became good at sports, and that was something I grabbed onto. And it perpetuated me through school, through undergrad and grad school. So yeah, it was a tough life, but it was, very beneficial because I learned to be a chameleon. I learned to be able to fit into any environment I could get into. And that paid off later in life and my military career, because most of the people in my profession in the military came from a messed up background. Or a difficult, challenging background, if you will.
So take me through a little bit your successful athlete. What was your idea around like was there a cultural suggestion that you should go to the military after school? What led you into the military? And then specifically, maybe take us through what your military time looked like.
Well, from where I was from, I was born in 1968, right? So I was born and grew up after the Vietnam War. Not a very popular thing, small town I was from. There a lot of people went and were messed up when they came home. So I would say my dad was a hippie, but I would say almost a hippie. He was anti-war, all that kind of stuff. So never in my life did I think military be a part of my life. But my junior year in college, I didn't get drafted. I thought I was, by professional baseball. So I knew kind of the writing was on the wall for that. So my senior year, I was in Virginia Beach. I think it's a pretty cool story. It's just kind of one of those stories you're prepared for, and it happens. I never thought about the military. I got recruited by the Virginia Military Institute for football. I didn't want to play football, and I sure as hell didn't want to be in the military at the time. But I was in Virginia Beach with a friend of mine, roommate and teammate, and we were at his dad's. His dad was retired, and he lived at this small storage unit, running it, just kind of a job to do. And we'd been out all night partying. We looked on the floor, woke up at like 6 in the morning. His dad drug us up, and there was a lady there with like 3 small children, and her husband was on a ship overseas. And this is like 1990. Her husband's on a ship. She had gotten evicted from her place where she lived, and she basically had to be out in 24 hours. I forget the circumstances. So we were like, okay, we're not doing anything. We'll help. So we ended up getting a truck, boxes, and started going to her house. She hadn't even packed up. So we started packing her house, and our first run to that storage unit, we get there, and one of the guys that was putting something in the storage unit was like a few doors down from me, big kind of buffed up dude, and I just started talking to him. Told him the story, and he's was like, I'm in the Navy. I got time off, man. I'll help you guys. He ended up being a SEAL. We spent about 24 hours all night packing, taking her stuff to the storage unit, and that was it. I ended up going from Virginia Beach, hitchhiked back to Richmond, Virginia, where I went to school, because that's how my transportation was, hitchhiking.
Wow.
And I started the process to sign up. That was it. That was the thought process was probably that short.
Wow.
Once he told me what he did, I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I was already looking at being a stockbroker, and I'm sure that doesn't fit me. Now, so yeah, I just happened to be in the right spot and found the right person, and I was open to it, and like anything in life, and that's where it happened.
Oh, I love that.
So did he try to, in your conversation at all, did he try to like, oh, you should join the Navy too, or was it just in observation of him?
Well, it was he was very neutral. Come to find out, he was very honest to me. Like a lot of times we have a part of an organization that we probably bust 1 or 2 people a day for being phony SEALs around the country. It's a epidemic.
What?
Sometimes we bust people. I've busted people national on TV. I've busted famous people. I mean, a lot of people.
This is people claiming to be Navy SEALs?
Stolen valor. Yeah, we do it every single day. Sometimes 4 or 5 times a day.
And what's their angle?
Well, they're usually trying to hustle someone. A lot of people want to be, we say everybody wants to be a frogman on a sunny day, right? But when it's cold, wet, and miserable, no one wants to do it, or it's dangerous. So a lot of people want to have that valor, but they didn't want to put their name on that empty check. So, so it's very common. Do it every day. So,
I believe it. I mean, we're in Coronado, and this is obviously kind of like a haven for SEALs, and I could easily see people, whether it's looking for the military discount or just looking for some level of, celebrity, because it is something to be very, very proud of.
Well, it's stolen. It's valor. It used to be in 2000 until I think it was 2008. It got knocked. It was a felony, but now if you make money doing it, then it is a felony still.
Wow.
But
wow.
Yeah.
So let's dive into your time as a SEAL a little bit, and then let us know how long you were in service with the Navy, maybe some of the tours that you were on. And then I'm so fascinated as to that point of deciding it was time to move on, and what that was like for you after having what seems like a very robust experience with the SEALs.
Yeah, well, I spent just over 20 years as a SEAL. I guess the claim to fame is I never really did a shore duty, so to speak, and that's in Navy terms for not having to deploy or not being able to deploy, whatever way you look at it. So I did 9 tours. I was in 3 different wars multiple times. I think I loved it. It was a lot of great times, a lot of hard times. I feel like I did a lot of good in the world, in some sense. But when it was time to move on, I knew it. I was just exhausted. I was heading back. If I wouldn't have retired at the time I retired, I'd have headed back to Afghanistan for about a year. And at the time in 2010, I retired in 2012. My last tour was in Afghanistan. And at that point, all of us, the people actually on the ground, knew it was a losing cause. Or as what our mission creep had turned into. We went from hunting just Al-Qaeda, then to transitioning into this building nation building thing. And that was, everyone on the ground knew it, but it seemed that no one above us knew it. And when we watched the collapse of Afghanistan, I knew I was right for that one. I was like, wow. Yeah. Because I think it was that, to me, because I think that was the biggest lie that we had seen in a long time, because we would send reports from the ground. And when I was the last time I was in Afghanistan, I was working with the Afghan commandos, their special forces. We'd send up reports, and by the time it made it up to the Pentagon and White House, everything was good to go. Like, we were like, these are dysfunctional people. They have no idea what they're doing. Without us, they will not continue the fight. And by the time it made it up, it was, hey, they're good to go. They're ready to fight and take over the nation. So, yeah, disappointing. But I'm glad I didn't go back. I was done.
Yeah.
Did that change your view of the military or the Navy at all?
No, it didn't change the view of the military and the Navy. It changed the view of the government for me. I lost a lot of faith and a lot of hope, like a lot of us did. In 2000 or 21, when we pulled out and allowed it to collapse, then yeah, for what, right?
Yeah.
And for what, for one short momentary decision, 20 years of work, so to speak. And yeah, disappointing, but it put a good perspective on me as far as how our government functions and what we're going to do in the future and all our future conflicts.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can imagine that's a perspective of and or reminder that authority doesn't always make the best decisions just because they are granted this status of being an authority figure, and that individuals oftentimes who are on the ground, quite literally in your case, or if it's, let's just say it's healthcare or something along those lines, people who are working with actual patients or the people are going to have a better pulse on some of the higher level decisions than, sitting around a boardroom table.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, I mean, obviously sometimes they're seeing things that we don't see, but that was probably not the case because all the so-called experts in foreign policy, well, I don't know if we do have any experts, to be honest with you. I mean, you can watch them all day, but they don't know they can guess just as much as any of us can.
Yeah. So take us through your integration back into civilian life. I would imagine after, decades in the military, it probably felt new, novel, interesting. I know it's definitely challenging for some. What was coming up for you, and then what ultimately led to you deciding the path that you've gone down now through leadership, speaking, working with youth?
Well, I think the first few years, it was just a sigh of relief. Like most people, you want your freedom back because you don't realize when you're in the military, most people never have been, don't really understand the restrictions that the Uniform Code of Military Justice puts on you, right? You don't have freedom of speech completely. You don't have freedom to do what you wish. You physically are owned by the government, right? I've been deployed to a combat zone with 10 hours notice before. So, that's just part of the life, and you either accept it or you don't. So when you get out, there's a sense of freedom and you understand what that feels like. But it took me probably about, let's say 5 years maybe to really, it dawned on me. Then I realized how much I'd lost, identity, your identity's lost, your teamwork, even though you don't like the people necessarily you're with, you still have a deep I would call it a brotherhood love in some sense. All of you share the same kind of consequences. You all share the same adversity. And it's a shared mindset in some sense because you're fairly dialed into one another. So then I started realizing that the world is more of a lonely place when you don't have all that. And, and a purpose. And you always have something to do, always have a purpose. So I think about 2015, 16 is probably my worst years. It kind of dawned on me what happened. And I probably had the worst couple of years of my life. Those years, it kind of all exploded. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd already written one book. And the first book, even when it came out, I think that was probably the lowest point in my life, possibly. And most people are like, oh my God, it's so exciting. You're doing book stuff, a tour. And I'm like, not really. Once it was over, I just felt lost, And it was a tough time for me. Even the editor said, that's kind of strange. She's like, most people are excited when the book comes out. Not me, I wasn't. But I think it just symbolized what was happening in my life. Everything was changing. Like I said, I had identity problems, everything.
Yeah. I mean, I was a college athlete and I played basketball competitively for 15, 20 years. And I didn't realize, and it took years being out of it to realize how much of my purpose, which is so critical for masculinity and men, my purpose and my identity was attached to this sport. And everything, like you said, on a different scale, obviously, but the kind of the sports arena will give you this camaraderie, this forced connection. You have parameters of the game that require you to work with other human beings in a synchronized way, where you have to abandon selfish actions and work cohesively for the greater good of a team. And these types of human behaviors, when they're very challenging, but then broken through are extremely rewarding. They're extremely satiating, regardless of the conditions and the circumstances. I had some asshole coaches. Don't get me wrong. Like,
yeah, we all have.
Like some of these guys have literally been like kicked out of, NCAA for various, abuse and things of this nature. But all that being said, in this container, you find so much of yourself. You pick up on human tendencies and patterns that are satiating and fulfilling. And when you leave that arena where the conditions are such that you have to be able to get through them, and you're left in kind of this dull, dusty, mainstream existence of life, especially as a man that thrives off of purpose and drive, it is very challenging to figure out where the hell you belong. And I would imagine it is 100 times that, maybe not, or maybe even more, coming out of the military, specifically the SEALs.
Because it's trauma bonding, right? Like,
yeah,
go through really intense. Did you know that that's what you were experiencing at this time when you were kind of in this low point? Were you consciously aware of like, oh, this is probably what's happening to me?
Yes, but I fought it. Thought it was, I thought a lot of things. I was like, well, this is kind of bullshit. People talk about post-traumatic stress and blah, I'm like, whatever. That was my opinion to it. I thought, well, you just, like everything in my life, I just kind of sucked it up. Right? And then I realized I think in 2016, when it really was kind of hitting me, was I was at nights, I would hear voices at night.
Wow.
Movement in my bedroom. I was freaking out. I'd walk clear the house, and my wife's like, no, there's nothing there. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of strange, Yeah. So my mind was working, and I started just accept it. I knew it was coming. I was like, wow, this is it. This is how it works. And it was a very tough time.
What were some of the, obviously for a while, it sounds like you tried to just bury it and compartmentalize it and, put it off to the side. But when you started to integrate some of these things that were showing up for you, what did that look like? Were you going to therapy? Were you looking at resources for veterans? What were some of the modalities that you were interested in?
Well, at the time, now since then I've done some different things, but at the time, I was fitness, diet, just trying to take care of myself, mental training. And I know it sounds odd, but meditation, I was doing a lot of different things to just take care of my body. If I woke up at 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning freaking out, I would just throw my running shoes on and get out until it was over, because physical fitness, if you run 10 miles, it's hard to be anxious. If my God, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
So your demons will be exhausted following you, so to speak.
Yeah. And
I did that for the longest time, but it was always, it was a time that was just a sense of emptiness and just nothing. So what? To answer that question, now what was one of my biggest questions, still is, it's still, how do you feel that now what time in your life? What do I do now? Now what? Right.
Yeah.
So how did you get the idea, or you and your partner, how did you go about like deciding that your mission or your purpose now would be, hey, I want to invest in youth?
It really comes down, my own life story, but also, warfare, and I don't really get into a bunch of it, but warfare, one of the things that I didn't, now I'm not saying everyone, but didn't really quite prepare myself for was what happens to kids in war. You can't segregate the population and just go after Al-Qaeda and those people that are integrated with society. And a lot of times you see, kids and women, kids destroyed, killed, damaged very badly. And that's hard. That's hard to see it. Even though you didn't intentionally do anything, you still did it. And it still happened, and you still witnessed it. And but I can honestly say, thank God I could say, when I was in charge of troops overseas, is that one of the basic things I said is, rules of engagement are one thing. Special forces, you have very lenient rules of engagement, but it's really just never intentionally hurt someone unless you have to. That's it. And only sometimes the person doing it will know. And, just keep your soul clean, so to speak. And so I was lucky for that. I never went down that deep side of the what could possibly happen, I think.
So you have this impetus of seeing children hurt, killed, and how did that translate to your civilian life? And like, okay, I'm going to start something. I'm going to create something from nothing.
I just felt a drawing to it. It's almost like I would say the term would be resume for my soul, right? I'm like, I probably have some catching up to do, so to speak. And then what can I bring of value? A lot of people are teaching leaders, people that are already making a lot of money, successful, happy people, more money. I get it, have at it. But I thought this would be something that would probably help me kind of fulfill myself. And it's selfish, but to also pass back to these kids that have been through, these kids I work with. I mean, some of these kids, some of the trauma they've had is just really hard to imagine it. Homeless at age 5, raped, drugs.
Wow.
People had just god awful situations, and as they grow up in this foster system, when they turn 18, no one cares, right? So hey, you're an adult, now you're a convict, and now you're recidivism, 80%. But it's just perpetual cycle, and I think that's something I can help change. I have a perspective on it. I kind of came from a tough background, and I think some of the things that I know and have learned that can pass on to these kids.
Yeah. So you've definitely got your pulse on where kind of the youth are sitting at in 2023, and what are some of the areas that you're seeing as consistent in need of attention? Like you're working with these kids probably on an intimate level. Are you seeing consistent patterns and deficiencies in culture and society that need addressing or fixing? What are you able to highlight in what you've been working with?
I know there's a lot of talk about those BLM movements, there's inequalities and stuff, but I see it. I think that's one of the things that changed my mind is most of the kids I work with are kids of color, probably 95%, I would say. But it's not really necessarily, it has to be a color thing, skin color thing, but it's a poverty thing.
Yeah.
And poverty is an epidemic. And and people that grow up in poverty, their odds of pushing past that and going higher is very low. I mean, they still have an opportunity in the United States, but the odds are against them more so than if you grow up in a great, safe environment. And I see that with these kids, and I see that, I mean, some of these kids, by the time they graduate high school that have been in a homeless system, in foster system, they have, and one expert told me once, it was something like 2 million words less they've heard from adults.
Wow.
So adults, constantly talk to kids and educate them. It's a constant dialogue. And a lot of these kids don't get that. They don't get the adult explaining things. They just shut up, get in a corner. That's it. That's your conversation. So their life has been affected and will be affected for longer periods of time. And that's where we need to intervene. I think it's a war on poverty, not necessarily a war, a racial or skin color war. So, yeah, but it does correlate to skin color. And I've seen that educated me a little bit more. I'm like, because I live in San Diego. I mean, I don't really run across open racism, right? I mean, you go back down south, maybe a different story, but most people I know, it's not a topic. But when you see it, when I see it firsthand, then that's a little different.
What do the family dynamics of these kids typically look like? You mentioned foster care for many. Is it for most, or are most of the family units broken?
Well, I've worked with probably, I would guess maybe 50 schools, 40 schools, but I started off at a place called San Pasqual Academy. It's in Escondido, about 40 miles northeast of San Diego, or Loya, where I live. It's a foster youth academy. So it's a high school. They have dormitories. All the kids live on campus, and they all go to high school there. So they have like 10 kids per dormitory with a foster parent in the house. So all those kids, have had very difficult situations where there's no parent involved, or the parent has been the kids have been taken away by the custody of the courts from their parents. Their parents can't raise them. I've seen kids with 3 or 4 siblings been pulled apart. One kid's at the foster youth academy, the other kid's with a family that adopted them. I mean, it's all kinds of awful, awful dynamics. But the San Pasqual Academy is probably one of the coolest, most wonderful places there is. I have a great relationship with those folks. We teach there several times a year. We try to get permanently put into the school to kind of keep a GUTS SEALpreneur program. That's the name of the program, SEALpreneurship and GUTS, and kind of keep it a permanent fixture in the school.
So fill us in on what your intervention in these kids' lives look like. Like what is the SEAL entrepreneurship program and the GUTS program really teaching kids?
Well, in one word or one expression would be a PhD in me. You know? So that's actually our website, myphd.me, for the education company. But it's really to teach them how to self-leadership. And it starts at the very basic of accountability, what it means, how you get it, how do you understand accountability, what does it mean to you? Discipline, which people talk a lot about discipline, but how do I get some of that? That's all the kids, right? If I can't get my ass on the computer, start my homework, how do I actually do that? So we cover the very basics of that: language discipline, language control, visualization. We understand the body. We teach them how the body works, how neurotransmitters work, how you create a habit. So we basically build on, we call it 23 evolutions. Because I don't know, in the SEAL teams, we use the word evolution for everything we do in jumping, diving, shooting, whatever it is. We call it evolution to constantly retrain the brain to you're evolving. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, when you went through training, but well, as a SEAL, like, well, I'm always training as a SEAL, right? There's no past tense. It's an active verb. It's always developing, always kind of growing. And that's the mindset we teach with the kids, is that you don't have to be, at the Z already. You start at A, and we'll build on this. And once you get your PhD in me, as we say, then you can do anything. That scaffolding that you get in your mindset will be able to take you anywhere.
Oh, that's awesome.
This is, it's obviously great for these kids, and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing with them. But these are also concepts that can help anyone, us even, people listening to the podcast, even if you're not a foster kid in poverty or in some sort of system. Like, these are just life skills in really, something that we talk about a lot on the show is ownership. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was your fault, but these are the circumstances that we're working with here. And so there is some kind of acceptance, and then, okay, I'm going to own my situation. I'm going to own, the tools that I'm putting in my toolbox. I'm going to own my experience. And what you're saying, this is kind of what I'm hearing you say, is like, you're helping these kids kind of take ownership for what they're currently dealing with, and then giving them tools in their toolbox to move through it, grow through it, so that it can become something they look back on and are ultimately grateful for, because it propelled them in a way that other kids, don't have the opportunity for.
Yeah. Well, I do teach adults, some. The book is really, the Guts book, Greatness Under Tremendous Stress, was really written for adults, but we use it with kids. But no, that the accountability is probably the most important thing, because that's extreme ownership of the outcome, right? And we tell these kids, because a lot of the people in the system that they work with, the counselors and government, it's easy to get a victim mindset. And you've been victimized, but you're not a victim. We talk about, like, if you're 15 years old, the next 70 years probably of your life is yours. Now, the outcome will happen to you either way, right? And we teach this to BUD/S students. When I tell how do you teach a SEAL, a BUD/S student, basic underwater demolition SEAL, that's our basic 6-month course. How do we teach them accountability? Well, it's fairly simple, and anybody listening can do this in their own life. When we give the students too many tasks, we give them 30 minutes to do a bunch of tasks. It's going to take an hour, but we give them 30 minutes. And when they come up to us, then we ask them, did you get it done? There's 3 responses: yes, no, and 1 is I fucked up. That's it. And it seems a little cruel at first, right? Because you had too little time to do too much. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to separate them from the excuses in their life, in their mind. So their default doesn't go right to, well, I didn't have enough time, right? They don't have those excuse reactions. So over time, they separate from that excuse, which changes their beliefs. And it also makes them very innovative and creative. And it teaches them prioritization, right? Do you prioritize a 20-minute meal or a 5-minute meal to get the job done? And those are skills that these kids have to learn as well. So once you break that cycle of excusing yourself, you're not a victim anymore. You start to go forward instead of looking back for the solution. So it really just changes their beliefs. And once you change your beliefs, like if you look at a SEAL, or not a SEAL, but a person that graduates, actually it'd be a SEAL, when they graduate and get their, what's called a trident, right? They're big, like my big wooden thing on the back there. That's a symbol of a SEAL, their trident pin. Once they get that trident pin, and I used to love to do this when I was a training officer, is go to the graduations and watch. And just sit there and watch the parents and the family. They all come and they see their student for the first time, and now they're, they look different. but it's always the mothers usually pin it out. They're like, little Johnny's not the same.
Mm.
They can look at him and go, wow, they don't know why. He carries himself different. He acts different. He speaks different. They can hear it in him. And not that he's arrogant or anything like that. There's just something that is transformed in him, in that person, and they can see it and hear it. It's pretty cool. It's a little bit sad for the mom and dad a little bit, because little Johnny's not little Johnny anymore. He's done.
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
person, and he has these skills in his life.
That's a critical point in a man, especially, but just the maturation process from adult or from child to adult. And I don't think many have actually gone through that process.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage.
It's a rite of passage, and the break from the mother is so critical for men, to look at your mother in the eye and see in her that she now sees you no longer as the boy, but as and it's a really, really important and powerful, and it's heartbreaking for the mother, and it can be for the boy too, who wants his mom to take care of him. And so I think it's just a critical step. And it's, I think, one of the things that the military is one of the last, I would assume, or maybe not the last, but one of the few who still have this really beautiful process of maturation. And I'm curious, as you work with youth outside of the military, I'm sure your training was quite intense, and I'm sure that when you were facilitating training for the military and for SEALs specifically, that it was quite intense. And I think that's the assumption that most have. How much of that is now translated into your work with youth? Is this like tough love, like yelling and screaming? And
no.
How does it look?
None of that. No, we don't have to resort to that, thank goodness. No, even BUDS, SEAL training, the first 6 months, people, when they think of it, they most likely think of like Marine boot camp.
Yeah.
And there is some yelling and screaming just to confuse you, but it's such a long process that a lot of it is just speaking like this to the students. Hey, we all know we live in San Diego. The water right now is probably 58, 59 degrees.
Yep.
We're like, okay, go ahead and go hit the surf, get wet, get sandy, come on back. And then, these kids are wet all day and night. So that's a miserable thing.
Yeah.
But it's not yelling and screaming all the time. It's just talking them through it, because we don't have to do that. Boot camps, they do that, but no, with these kids, it's the same way. Matter of fact, we treat them as exact equals. At first, they're probably a little bit too disrespectful, but over time, we learn trust, because trust is earned over time. And we let the kids, we start off, we treat them the same as we treat ourselves. We let them set the ground rules, which is pretty cool, because the ground rules of the class takes maybe an hour, usually come out exactly the same as if we had written it. But they're empowered because they wrote them, and they check each other on it. So that process is just a trust building process. And over time, they start to trust us and start to realize we probably know a little bit about what we're talking about.
What is the general response? There's probably some outliers that push back for a while, or whatever they have maybe kind of fixed in their mind, or they don't want to detach from what is familiar, even though it's very uncomfortable. I'm sure there are those outliers, but generally, like, what is the response like from kids when they meet you and start learning from you guys?
At first, now it varies, because my course at San Pasqual Academy, Charles and I, my partner's course, and our course is actually accredited, which is pretty cool and not easy to do with the school system to get high school credits for it. So they take it as elective. Some of them take it because they don't want to take something else, but most of them take it because they want to. And that's a great thing, no one coming in. Because our elective course is actually the #1 course at the academy. We actually have to disenroll some people because the state has limitations on how many people can be in the class. But hopefully they want to come in. That's the first part, right? So they want something. They know there's something that we have that they probably want some of it. But we've had a lot of pushback from kids. Some kids just they think it's bullshit. They've been told by a lot of adults with a lot of titles that they can help them and they can do all these miracles and all this stuff, and they've been let down over and over. We make them no promises. Everything's internal to them. Take what you can use and discard the rest, right? We're very open about that. And we tell them, I think we relate to them with our stories, and relate to them. We show them some SEAL stuff, but not a tremendous amount, because a lot of the kids have no idea. Maybe the boys know from playing video games, but a lot of the girls don't know what a SEAL is. They don't care. But the response is pretty good, I think.
Yeah, no, I would assume that, I mean, I would guess that most kids are, responding well to it, once they, see that you're a trustworthy person. And I love that you take that approach that trust needs to be earned, and kind of understanding, having been through similar situations in your own childhood, that, you know, just because, like Chase said, just because someone is in authority doesn't mean they have the right answer, or it doesn't mean that they're going to follow through. And I love that you are able to provide that for them. I'm curious, working with these kids, what have they taught you?
Good Lord. That I'm on the right path. That what I'm doing, I need to scale it up, continuously scale this up, because it might be maybe one of the most important courses some of these kids will take. They don't have the parenting, they don't have the safe environment, they don't have a lot of those things. So to be able to actually control their own mind and change their own perspective, get their own beliefs, and have that PhD in me, then that will probably be one of the most critical skills they'll ever need. And I think I'm on the right path. My partner and I have, it's obviously not easy. I'm almost embarrassed sometimes to say it. Sometimes it sucks. It really does. It's hard. It really, to have a kid that's been through trauma and been through hardness in their life and are disrespectful and you name it, it's hard. But when you see them in the end, when they come out of it and they, they're engaged, kids that had their hoodies on, not even looking up, now they're engaged in front of the room speaking. You teach them about fear and what it happens to the body and all those things. We actually use public speaking for that. But I think just knowing that this is the right course, and now I've started to team up with the initial conversations from some very large organizations that have seen what we're doing and have reached out, and they're like, hey, maybe you were onto something good. Like, I think we are. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to team up. Actually, there's a gentleman by the name, I hope his staff is listening, is Ken Blanchard. If you know, he's probably one of the biggest leadership companies. He's in San Diego.
Okay.
I think it's an $80 million company a year. He's a phenomenal man. He's written like 60 books. Well, his foundation and I just started having a conversation, having lunch, and kind of feeling out how we can work together, because they have assets and resources that I just don't have. And they know how to create curriculum and do things.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just making up, right?
There's a system to all of this. And so I'm really glad they're teaming up with you, because you have what can't be taught, which is the experience and the on the ground research, And so on that thread of leadership, I know you've spent a lot of time probably contemplating, but then educating on leadership. What are some of the core tenets of leadership from your perspective? And what are we missing in the world today? I can't say that I can just off the top of my head list off a bunch of amazing leaders in my life.
I think from the perspective of steward, a lot of people talk about servant leadership, doesn't quite do it for me, but I always consider myself a steward of the people that I worked with, right? And it's drilled into you from day one as an officer in the SEAL teams. What's one of the first things when you start training? Some of the military, right? The officers are elitist, and the enlisted guys are kind of serving them. In the SEAL teams, it's exactly the opposite. And when you first get a training, when you go to eat, the officers get in the back of the line. And if the food runs out or the time runs out, they don't eat. It's a constant reminder that you are serving, you are a steward of the mission. I call it the MOM model. It's very simple to people to understand. Is mission, others, me. So when you make decisions, you make decisions off the mission, off of other people, and then yourself last. And if you do that, you're probably going to be right. And that kind of breeds humility into you when you realize that you probably don't know as much as you think, which we could probably use in today's world. But being a steward, being a protector, being a guardian, if you will. And that's how I think I permanently changed the way I see myself in leadership. And I think most good leaders do.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I think we could use a bunch of that. And character. My next book is probably going to be about character, ethos. And I think defining that, and we do it with kids. They come up with their own ethos statement, but defining what you believe in and aspiring, to be that, even if you're not that yet, you can aspire to be, and then you can put in place a process to get you to where you want to be, that leader or that person.
Yeah, walk us through that, because that's fascinating to me, and I think that we talk about it all the time on the show, which is if you have a big enough dream, you don't have to have a crisis. And maybe walk us through what that sort of ethos defining process looks like with kids.
Well, with the kids, we do it near the end, right? After we have done all our training, and the last course we did was 6 weeks. So it's a long course, and every day. So, but near the end is one of the things we would do is we after they've already explored a lot of values themselves, discipline, all this stuff, and then we start to let them define. Not me as the teacher defining, or me as the adult, the person with a white coat on or a plaque on the wall, them as a person, and just asking themselves the right questions. And a lot of the kids, I would see that sometimes it's very strange. Instead of looking at people, we ask them who inspires you, who's a leader in your life. Sometimes that'll happen, but a lot of times they'll look at the exact opposite and go, well, that person, some of them, their parents, that's what I don't want to be.
Yeah.
There's their traits over here. So we'll draw up like a perimeter in a big circle, and what skills, what values, what traits they want, put that inside the perimeter, protective perimeter, and then everything else on the outside, and they'll use something to create their own statement. They'll use their own words to come out to who they aspire to be, not who they think they are or who they, because a lot of people think, well, I'm just who I am, right?
Right.
It's a common phrase. I'm pretty much just a jerk or whatever. Like, no, not you, but you can aspire to be different. It just takes practice and rehearsing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool process. And I tell you, actually, we lead it off with, and I even let it in the book, is one of the strongest things we used to do that kind of brought you back into the now moment in your life. And the SEAL teams, before we deploy, we would, you got to get your will, all those kind of things. The spouses would come in, the SEAL teams would brief them up. Hey, by the way, there's a chance your husband will be killed. My wife's heard a bunch of those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And they go over the process of, okay, if he's killed, who do you call? Who takes the kids? If you see 2 people show up at a door, 3 people in uniform, he's dead. And it's really kind of a rough way to do it. But so you what do you do? How do you react? Where's your kid go? What's your neighbor do? And then for the guys, you have an opportunity with that will is submit a letter home. I call it. It's your final letter, not your eulogy, but what do you, if you want to, what do you say to the world? It's a pretty cool drill to do with yourself.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful drill. And I do this, I do it with adults as well, but kids, like who's going to read that letter? And then you have 2 envelopes, and one envelope is who you want to read it, and the other one is what the letter is. And then at the end of the whole drill, and you read your own letter back out to people, you go, who wasn't in that? Who didn't get to read that? And especially for leaders, if you're working 10, 12 hours a day in an office or in a team, they should probably be on that list.
Yeah.
So you're not having one life at home and one life at work, because you're really one person, and you express your values and your love and all those things through your work as well. So it's a good way to open up and go, okay, what does my life mean to me? What do I say to people when I'm not here?
I think that's really, really powerful. I think it also would prompt, at least for me, as I'm thinking about this, it would prompt a reminder or an awareness as to why I'm not communicating with these people in an authentic, expressive way now. It's like, wait, I probably shouldn't wait until I'm done.
Yeah, that's right.
To communicate to this person that I love them, that I care for them, that I'm here for them. Like, let's not wait for crisis to have these sort of deep human connections.
Yeah.
Yep. It's almost too late, right? I mean, there's a lady, Bonnie Ware is her name. She was, I think, not a hospice nurse, but whatever, I forget, the end of life nurse. She wrote a book, and she speaks and stuff. It's The 5 Regrets of the Dying. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting to see, there's just 5 main regrets, and most of them deal with fear of being authentic self, living your own life, fear of expressing to my friends and family how much I care. I mean, it's simple stuff. No one that says, I wish I'd had a Ferrari or I'd had a beach house in the Bahamas, no one says that.
Yeah.
When they approach death and they approach that. So those glimpses and those insights are moments you need to capture and go, okay, let's bring this back to my actual life. Because if you regret that in your last year of your life, regret those things, that means somehow you're regretting it every day of your life if you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And there's something that's missing from you.
Yeah. It's so true. And it comes back to relationship with self. I wish I would have shown more of myself or been more authentic or followed my dreams. That's relationship with yourself, but also relationship with the people you love. And I'm so grateful that you're teaching these kids early on that that's a core value of a fulfilling life, is sharing and expressing and not being afraid to do the thing that might be scary or vulnerable. Because I I'm just thinking of this now, but like, I would guess that these kids probably have trouble getting vulnerable or allowing themselves to be vulnerable. And that is where intimacy lives, is when two people are agreeing to be vulnerable together, and sharing that creates the possibility for intimacy. Intimacy is such a core tenet of having a fulfilling life and feeling love in your life. So it's like, downstream, like go upstream and teach them to express and not be afraid in that way. And I can see how that would have, downstream ripple effect for, potentially the rest of their life.
And mine.
Yeah.
I think most of us, right, if you teach anything, you realize, well, I'm teaching myself again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Reinforcing what I think I know, and I better start believing and living it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How has this process for you, as you develop these courses, you're working with these people, how has it translated into your life, with your family dynamic, being a father? Have you found yourself like reflecting and maybe changing or at least moving on different positions or behaviors that you had?
God, I don't know if I've changed any behaviors because most of this stuff I've learned over the years, been taught over, through the SEAL teams and through reflection and whatnot. But I hope so. My son will be the judge of that when he grows up. He's almost 16. I think he's probably tired of hearing me. But he sees what I do. I hope we my wife and I have a good example for him, what it means to, be a good person, and to live life. Because, I tell him this all the time. Sometimes I feel like I cheated him because the neighborhood I live in, like literally like 30 yards across the cul-de-sac of me, the guy has a Lamborghini, a Rolls Royce, and a Bentley. And this is his second or third home, whatever, fourth home, whatever it is.
Wow.
And I'm telling my son, this is not normal life,
Yeah.
I feel almost like I cheated you out of that privilege of poverty, out of that grinding effort to get ahead. But if you understand life and, you just start a little bit further down the road than I did, and then you can go way further,
Yeah.
Hopefully that translates to him is, just have ambition, do something you really love to do. And life, that means, that doesn't necessarily mean making as much money as possible or anything, but it means something fulfilling, something that will sustain happiness, not just pleasures and enjoyment, but fulfillment of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a son of two parents that came from absolute poverty. I mean, the mountains of rural Montana, no electricity, well water, just absolutely brutal.
What's wrong with well water, man?
No, like walking down the hill to pull the bucket up the well. No hate on well water. So, and they made a name for themselves, like business, successful career, to where myself and my siblings were born into a space that was, far outside of the realm of possibility, seemingly from their life. And it's funny, as I'm so motivated by them and I look at their life, it's not what they've accumulated from a wealth or an asset standpoint, but rather the foundation that they were in, the container that they were able to develop for the family unit and for a space and a domain of love that I'm so motivated by. And I look at them and look at the stone that they pushed up the freaking hill. And even though they've got plenty of life left and they'll continue pushing that stone, I'm motivated to take that placement and push it up further, to the degree that the cumulative distance that this stone has been pushed up the proverbial life mountain is to be looked at and respected and loved, and that just continues. And I think that's how we make a better world, is we're able to not place meaning on the physical accumulation of wealth and assets and money, but rather the spiritual or emotional fabric of what it means to be a part of something that's of love, and whether you can expand that through your life and your life's purpose. And so I think that, even just knowing you briefly, like the way that you embody this will be seen by a child or these youth or the people of your community, and it'll go beyond just the physical assets that have been accumulated in one's life.
Yeah, God, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hope. Well, I guess your parents are probably proud that you just said that. So I hope one day my son will be the kind of say the same thing. My dad, he said this a million times, and he did this, and he constantly did this. He understands. I think he understands, and I explained to him that stewardship that I left with the SEAL teams, is still there, man. That image in my subconscious and my mind that I feel in the world is who I am. It's still there.
Yeah.
I don't think that ever is going to change. And I'm very proud of that. I mean, I think we need more people to be stewards and more people to help others people. The first couple decades of your life, it's all selfish, most likely. But then you kind of, as you grow up, and some people don't, but as you grow and expand and evolve, as I say, then you should be in that.
Yeah.
Get others, the others around.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm curious. We didn't have this on our list of questions for you, but I'm so curious. This is a very unique line of work and very unique skill set that you have, and very unique population group that you're working directly with. They also have a very unique perspective on the world. And I'm just curious, like, when you, Ed, look out into the world and you see all the division and all the political divisiveness, global crises that divide people, and you have to become an expert on this overnight, and you have to take a stance. And I mean, I'm sure you understand what's going on out there, and it seems kind of shaky. Like, what is your perspective on the things that are happening out there when you're working so closely with a population group that doesn't really have the luxury of being a part of that madness? Do you know what I mean? Like, I
do. Well, like kind of Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's hard to worry about the enlightenment of yourself in the world when you're worrying about where you're going to eat,
right?
Where you can sleep. Yeah. I think we have ignored. I know we've had war on poverty, and I think we have ignored one of the most critical pieces. And the kids. I mean, the kids are nothing but, victims, if you would, victimized people. They have no say-so. That is what creates adults. You look where these kids go. We're worrying about all these things overseas, and I understand that. And worrying about different things, worrying about pronouns, whatever that means. I still haven't gotten my head around that.
Us either.
And that's not even political. That's just like, I just don't know what people are thinking when they say those things.
Yeah.
So
walking on eggshells with every breath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't even know. I don't even know what I don't know. So, but I think we've ignored and not put enough resources into changing the foundation of our country. And these kids are just innocent kids. I just look at the Ukraine thing, which is obviously it's a dated thing to say, but we're pouring more money into Ukraine than we pour an entire education K through 12 in a single year.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
In our country, we know the country's falling short. We know kids are depressed. We know all kinds of things, but we are just not investing in that, I don't think, in the right way. And we're investing all this other nonsense. And then we've lost all trust. We talked about trust. We've lost all trust. Most people have in our government systems. It's gotten so big and greed. Once you have a large amount of people with greed and self-interest thrown into the mix and you mix it up, it's going to come out greedy and shifty and lying and cheating and stealing. And I think a lot of people have lost it. We're getting ready to start in World War III, and not to get into the war or anything, but we're getting ready to start World War III, and people are just ignoring it.
Yeah.
But we were at war for 20 years, or at least the military was. American population just kind of said, hey, it's over there. That doesn't affect us. I don't know any military people. Let them do what they do, and we're good. But we're picking a big fight, and we have a lot of work to do here first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we are trying to solve problems from the outside in instead of from the inside out. We're ugly, we're hideous, we're out of shape, and we're trying to get plastic surgery, put more makeup on, dye our hair, put wigs on, instead of eating better, starting to move our bodies, sleeping better, and working on it from the inside out.
Yeah. I just got this image of someone being injured, and we're putting Band-Aids over shrapnel in the body. And it's
Band-Aids and gangrene.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right.
And it's
keep putting Band-Aids on, it's just going to get better. No, it's not.
It's not.
Leg off.
No,
Right.
we can't go from the outside in. And it seems so blatantly obvious to me that if we wanted to improve downstream, we could go upstream to the kids. To the kids,
Yeah,
which
break the
are
cycles.
the future, and invest in them. And I don't have the exact, studies and research on hand, but we listen to a lot of like Jordan Peterson. He clinical psychologist, one of the greatest minds of our time, in my opinion. And he talks about investing in kids and education and that system all the time. And he basically is explaining that other countries who invest in their kids first, they see better outcomes across the board everywhere in places that you might not even expect it. And it just seems so blatantly obvious that we would start with the kids, that we would do more of what you're doing, that we could somehow, clone Ed Hiner and make 1 million of you to do what you're doing.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. No, actually, I mean, for me, I can't be in every classroom. So our goal as a company, so we're not a nonprofit, we're social entrepreneurs. I think that's extremely important for people to hear because, I'm not a government fan. I'm not, I know we need government, but government, I've been around government all my life mostly, and it does not solve the problems, right? You can keep throwing money into the fire pit, but, it's not going to help it. And I think this social entrepreneur is a way to solve these problems. Is find a problem, let people smart that are interested and driven to do something, go in and do it and get funded. And that's one of our goals, to get electronic and to distribute it across the country. And write it in such a way that it will not take an Navy SEAL in the classroom to explain it to people, right? It's self-explanatory. It's just steps. It's like just A to Z. How do you get there? Well, this is how you do it. This is the roadmap.
Yeah.
No, it's important. I hope people listening realize how important education and taking care of their kids before they become adults, is really critical.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the success stories that you've seen from some of these kids going through the program?
Well, a lot of the kids we work with have went on to go to college, graduate college now. They're at the graduation rate. But a lot of them had done, went on and literally been very successful. We've only been doing it since 2019.
Okay.
But, these kids didn't go back into the system. They didn't become homeless because 25% of the kids in foster academies or foster system go homeless at 18. A lot of them do. But they haven't, that's not happening. They're going to college. They're moving on and just moving on with their lives. We got some really good letters written too. Which we cherish and we keep. These kids have written some very unique letters to us.
Wow.
I'm sure there's impact that trickles out that you can never know fully, because some are just not coming back to share how you've impacted their life. But I'm curious if, what was I just going to ask? Sorry, cut this out, Sage.
Area 51.
No,
actually, yes.
Well, I was there once, but
okay. Well, we can come back to Area 51, but I'm curious how because these kids probably see you Navy SEAL, you're fit, you're in shape, you're successful. They think, hey, maybe I should go join the military or join the Navy. Like, do you advise kids coming out of it and seeing maybe the shortcomings of government and or the military? Like, how do you advise kids there?
I have had a few kids in my classes that approached me that wanted to be in the military. One of them is an extremely sad story. It was when I first did my first course. The executive director, Tracy Thompson of the juvenile court system, wonderful dude. Guy knows his business. He's been doing this for a long time. He knows the streets. I pitched him for like 4 hours, supposed to be in like 30 minutes. 4.5 hours later, whatever, he's like, okay, come on in and do this. So he's the guy that got us to start. I'm like, hey, I'll do it. This is all free. We'll do it. We'll run a summer camp. I just want to see what we can do is something good. Well, when I showed up to the academy to take a tour of the school that we're going to do the summer camp in, my partner and I, the student that introduced himself that was showing us around, he's a senior. And man, I looked at him, and his name's Omar. I won't give his last name, but I'm like, man, where are you from? And he goes, I'm from Iraq. I'm like, I know that, but what city are you from? And he was from Fallujah. And he told me what year his family finally made it over to America. And I was in his backyard destroying the place.
Wow.
And this kid, long story, he had found his way to Michigan with his parents, trauma. His parents, I don't know what they did to him, but he became homeless. And, he just lived an awful life. His parents suffered severely from trauma. found his way to this academy, and was now about, he was in his senior year, spoke perfect English. He learned both languages at the same time. So he had mentioned he wanted to be in the American military, and we have a division of the SEAL teams that does that, brings in foreign people to help the different things we do. Had him an interview set up and everything. I called back to the school after the program, and they're like, man, Omar had been locked up. He'd gotten, so he went into the prison system as a 17 and a half or 18. I think he just turned 18. So hard luck story, just, never really got to him in time.
Yeah.
That's how that was the introduction. I'm like, damn, so what we're doing is probably very valuable. Had we hopefully maybe something we would have said, done with him that would have kept him in the path that he was on.
Yeah.
What are the freaking chances of that just all of those synchronicities?
Oh my God. What hurt my feelings, I can tell you that. Honest to God, it did. I was like, oh my God, this kid's traumatized because of stuff that me did.
What I would imagine for many who are, out of the military and are dealing with maybe these instances that bring up the past. And even in your experience, like you were alluding to earlier, having night terrors or dreams, what for you, having been through this, would you say to those who are dealing with something similar? What has been healing for you? What have been the steps that you've taken to navigate through this very challenging and very unique experience that really is probably unique to those like you?
Well, there's a lot of, everybody has their own reasons why things come back to them, but something that, dramatic in your life has to kind of imprint in your mind, in your body, your cells, everything. Well, me, now we're going to get into it. I in 2021, I actually went to Mexico on an experimental kind of psychedelic retreat, which I thought at first, until I signed up for it, I thought it was stupid, to be honest with you. I was like, man, this is bullshit. But a friend of mine, a pretty famous guy, his name's Johnny Walker, wrote a best-selling book. He was one of our interpreters. He was there for about 6 years in Iraq with us. I mean, the guy's done like thousands of missions. I mean, absolutely brought him back to San Diego. He got citizenship. But Johnny was, I guess, really messed up. And I saw him at a party, and he wasn't drinking. He had his wife with him. He's different. I'm like, man. So long story short, he says, I'll call you tomorrow. So he calls me in a one-way conversation. He's funny. He's a funny guy, heavy accent name. And he says, he told me about this psychedelic retreat run by the Mission Within, which is sponsored by Vets, the Solution, which is a nonprofit, a Navy SEAL Marcus Capone and his wife started. And he told me what it did. And I'm like, man, get out of here. But I trust him. I said, okay. And while he was talking to me, I got online, signed up, put my resume, my bio in there, who I was, boom, immediately they came back, and I went to Mexico. And matter of fact, on September 11th, the 20th year anniversary of 9/11, I was 3 hours into a heavy dose of Ibogaine. So if anybody knows what Ibogaine is, it's the strongest psychedelic on earth. It's the grandfather. It's not like ayahuasca or mushrooms or something like that. It goes from 8 to 36 hours. It's a long process. You're hooked up to an EKG, O2 saturation, IV poured in.
You jumped into the deep end.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mess around. No, why not? The moderation's for cowards. That's a SEAL expression, right? That's why we drink too much. We fight we do anything too much. If one's good, 10's better, right? Yeah. So why waste around in the shallow end? You just go ahead and get on the deep end.
No need to microdose. Just head to the grandfather of all psychedelics.
And then after that, it was on a Friday night. I came out of a Saturday. And then on the Sunday, we do 5-MeO-DMT, which is the venom of a toad. They crystallize it, you smoke it, and there's no way to explain that on this. If anybody that's out there has ever done the toad, they would know that there's no explanation.
There are no words.
When you launch on this thing, and that, to me, they kind of underplayed that, to be honest. They kind of sucked me in. I was like, okay, you kind of got me here, because it took me 2 weeks to shake that off. Wow. Like to kind of come back to an emotional stability level. I mean, I was like, oh my God. I mean, once you go, and this thing takes you into, they call it the God molecule, right? As you guys know, and people listening, because once it hits you, you know you're in a space of God, not a person, but of this eternity energy, this loving kindness, joyful, just blissfulness. And then as you do the heavy dose, you go actually to your death, which, weirds a little bit of people out. It kind of weirded me out for a few minutes or a few hours when I came back. I'm like, oh my God, I was dead. That's what it's like. And that was kind of a wonderful experience. So, but that has probably been the single most thing that has done the most for me. It's taken, let's see, that's a year and a half ago almost. I have yet to have a dream, which is usually every few months, I just have these cycles of dreams and I couldn't control it. I'd get up, it would just be in my brain. My wife knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. It would last for a couple of days. When I was obsessed with it, but yet I haven't had it yet.
Wow.
Did you go into your psychedelic journeys with any sort of intention?
Yeah. Oh, well, that was there's like a 3-week counseling session before you go 3 or 4 weeks. And, being obsessive compulsive on that thing, I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? So I talked to my counselor and I did everything they said. I said intentions, I meditated, prayed on it for like over and over and over and over and over and over. So once my Ibogaine kicked in, unlike some guys that admitted they didn't really do the pre-work, the intention setting, mine didn't mess around. I had some strange things happen in the very beginning of this journey, but went right inside my own brain. And anybody's never done it, you can actually navigate inside your mind. These memories and things happen. And I went right to a moment that had been plaguing me. And I dealt with it. I saw this exact same scene that I'd done a while back. It was right in front of me. And then, I guess if I had to summarize that weekend, it would be I was gutted by the devil or a demon and spent a day with God.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it was very odd.
Isn't that polarity, right? Isn't that life? You're one day in hell only to experience the context with which you can experience the bliss on the other side.
Yeah. Is there any way that you can, obviously the Ibogaine was helpful in that it allowed you to go pretty deep back into a memory that obviously was plaguing you, that needed to be looked at, that couldn't be swept under the rug or, left in the closet anymore, really shining a light on it. Do you think that was the primary mechanism of your healing, just looking at it and
oh, I know it was
acknowledging it, or was there some other lesson that the medicine gave you?
Well, I guess I would explain it like this: is that what happened to me when I saw this scenario develop in my mind that I'd done? I saw it, I could smell it, I could feel it, I could hear it, but it was without the emotion to it. I wasn't it wasn't like this horrific scene, and it is a horrific scene, but I didn't feel it at the time, and I just accepted it. I just, the counseling was right on about, hey man, just lean into this and don't fight it. Just accept it, surrender, and go with it, which I did. Now, some of the other SEALs who were down there with me did, and they fought it. And they fought it for like 36 hours. Wow. The Ibogaine was on them for a long time, but yeah, I could tell that moment on. And then when I did the 5-MeO DMT on Sunday, that was it. That was not a part of my life anymore. I don't know how to explain how I just knew that was not part of my life. I just didn't feel the same to it anymore. I didn't think about it. I didn't get emotional about it. And then, turn my head from it in my own mind, my mind's eye. I didn't avoid it. It is what it is. And I still fall back on, I never intentionally hurt someone unless I had to. And that was, thank God I did that,
Yeah.
That is a great thing, by the way. People listening, I think that's the new way for post-traumatic stress with a lot of veterans and rape victims, traumatized people. That is probably going to be the newest thing that comes about that everyone is going to be looking into.
You mean Ibogaine specifically?
Well, I think just hallucinogenics. Yeah, I know it sounds strange because it's, especially people like, oh, damn, hippies, man, they're just tripping. No, it's not that. It's not something recreational. I probably will never do it again, but
yeah,
it was definitely worthwhile.
About these experiences, it's not like, wow, I loved that hit. Let me go take it again next weekend.
It's not addictive.
It's a very, very satiating, fulfilling experience.
It's like
tapped out.
It's like running a marathon.
Yeah,
it's like you can get a lot of value out of it, and it's quite the experience. But you're not signing up the next weekend to experience the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you think that you could have gotten to that level of acceptance without these journeys?
I don't know, maybe time, but I've been to that. Hell, it's been 9 years since I've been out, and years since some of that what took place. I just don't, I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe I think that doing that weekend with the 5-MeO and the Ibogaine was just a way of releasing that energy, if you will, from every part of me. I'd read, I'd read a lot on going into it, and I'd read a lot of spiritual stuff on how to heal yourself, and The Body Keeps Score, right? There's that newest book, and talks about the trauma, which I was like, that's bullshit until I did it. And then after, the 5-MeO, man, I felt, I would say probably just 20, 40 pounds lighter when I got up, like, oh my God.
Mm.
Wow.
Hours I just sat there like in bliss, seeing the world in a whole different, like, birthed way, like it's new to you again. You see things, it's incredible, man. I'm very grateful that I did that, man.
I'm so glad there are these groups that are doing this in a really, really intentional healing way. I'd be curious, your thoughts on God or divinity prior to this, and then what and how that has changed after the psychedelic experience.
I'll say I was, from Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains. So it was like, with my grandmother Baptist, I always have a sense of God, Jesus Christ in my mind. Maybe it's like alcoholism. This is always in there, but I think it's bigger than that to me. It was very big, I've always loved Buddhist mindset, Buddhist philosophies of life. It's not really religion, more of a philosophy. But I think when you experience this and it rips away that ego, and that's what these things do, they really get rid of your damn ego, where you see things without that belief system that you have, just constantly reminding yourself who you are. It showed you that everything's connected. Everything. It's not scary. It's just the end of you as the ego, as your thing. And that scares people thinking about it. And, maybe all of us, but just that connectedness of it all, just the understanding and feeling that overwhelming sense of joy, love, if you will, and connectedness. And most people say, well, you could have a debate and go, well, you were high on some hallucinogenic. Well, okay, well, you're high, like you're talking about running marathons, you're high on endorphins. Only people reason you do it, it's an addiction, right? I mean, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all those neurotransmitters, you're high on something that makes you happy, right? So if you're just high, but for me, I was like, well, that was a real experience and it's stayed with me. That's the critical part. I think it will stay with me for a long time. I hope so.
Yeah. Our audience is no, I would say most of the people in the audience are listening along and are familiar with these types of conversations, and I'm sure they're tracking with you just fine. How have these experiences changed your relationship with your wife or partner or just friendships in general? Has it touched those at all?
It has. Well, my wife has noticed a difference. Obviously, she knew right when I got back. And my patterns, my life, drinking and nightmares, all that stuff, that's over. I mean, that's a big, for her, that's a relief. Filling the void now, that's a different story, right? How, because some of that was part of the identity, I think. And then once it's over, it's very important to kind of connect with people, get into another space in your life that, fills that gap, whatever that gap is, that you can continue this kind of, journey, I guess you would call it. That's the hard part. But that's the important part, is always looking to see what's going to fulfill me in life and what's the best thing to use the rest of the time I have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is not much. I'm in the fourth quarter. You guys aren't. I call it fourth quarter living.
No way.
I might even be in overtime. I don't know.
You look very
like,
vital.
Yes, you look like you're going to be around for a long time. Coming back to you a little bit, I have so many questions, and I know we're coming up on time. I know, but I want to give you the opportunity. I know we've shared a few thus far in the conversation, but we really like providing our listeners with unpopular opinions. because that's something that is a ninja life skill these days, is being able to hear potentially an unpopular opinion that maybe you don't agree with, but you're able to just listen along and have an open mind and hear the other person's perspective. Take as long as you want and go anywhere you want with this, but is there an unpopular opinion that you maintain that you'd like to share?
God. So half the world will get rid of me on that. No, I mean, I think at the moment, I mean, I'm very adamant against us involving ourselves in this Ukraine war. And I, you know, the argument always goes back, well, there's people dying and suffering. That's what war is. It's not about the people in leadership position dying and suffering. It's about the people that shouldn't be getting harmed. I think we've done a lot to get into this war. You know, if you look back, you know, the Ukrainian history was part of Russia. If you look at the eastern part of Ukrainians, I know some Ukrainians, they identify as being Russian. They don't identify as being Ukrainian. Putin, as bad as he is, he's been complaining for years, decades, actually, 20-some years, all the NATO countries on his border. And we have failed to actually try to remedy this thing. We are jumping on the bandwagon, beating the war drums. Any news outlet. Now, when you get politicians on both sides of the aisle agreeing, probably something scary here.
Yeah.
Because we do not know what we're doing. We failed to do any diplomacy. I mean, Adam Schiff in 2020 said at the House floor, he said, when he was speaking about impeaching, you know, then President Donald Trump, he's talking about we're fighting Russia. We would have support Ukraine to fight Russia over there, so we don't fight over here. I'm like, when did we start fighting Russia? I think we need, you know, I think we're asleep at the wheel here, and this can really light off into something extremely dangerous for the world. And we're so accustomed to everything being over there, but Russia's not a normal country. They have more weapons than we do, right? We do not know how they're going to escalate it. And then, you know, just all the principles of warfare, you know, deceit is the number one. So I have a hard time believing what comes out on the information that the White House has given and that people overseas have given, because I've been there and watched in wars, actively fighting the war, and watched what our news people report and how it's perpetuated.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in Iraq when the insurgency was kicking up and things started happening, I would see reporters basically it's literally staging things to report on to escalate it. When we were on the ground going, no, that's just not true. I'm here with you, because I know that everybody used to go out with reporters and kind of hide in plain sight to find bad guys, but I was watching what they do. So I distrust it. Yeah. I think we need to just really look at diplomacy. Mm-hmm. Keep, you know, Russia, there's no reason we should be enemies with them. They have different belief systems. They're very conservative in their belief system. I get it. But I just think we need to pull them closer. So I know it's not a very popular thing to say, but currently I think that's one of the biggest crises we have, right? Is that it can turn very lethal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a situation where if the worst happens, everyone loses.
There is no winner.
There is nothing left.
They call it, well, because they're talking like tactical nukes. They use that word, tactical nukes, as if it's like some surgical damn thing that's going to happen. Right. That means the entire city goes away, and God only knows what the fallout of that and what's the retaliation and where does it stop. It's like, dude, there is no sense.
No.
Maybe if they all smoked the damn toad, they would stop.
I know, right? I know.
It's funny because all this, you know, his father was at that Mexico thing, and pretty much everybody was unraveled when we finished that weekend. We're like, holy shit. We joked about that. So, man, you let the world leaders go to a retreat and do a little bit of this action, and then have a summit and be like, okay, we'll figure this out, man.
Yeah.
There's no need in doing what we're doing over here.
Right.
Yeah. That's the more beautiful world that I want to live in.
And I think, you know, coming full circle on this entire conversation, and I just so appreciate you highlighting these things that are important, because if we don't actually talk to individuals like you who have the experience and the knowledge and the bravery to be able to just communicate counter narrative ideas, we're going to be funneled into the kind of mainstream, whether it be news or just social. You know, it ends up being more of like a social movement, even though these things are of utmost severity pertaining to war and human lives. And so having these tough conversations and putting forth these concepts is so vitally important. And it comes back to what we've been talking about through this entire conversation, which is start inside, start making a change in yourself and in the people that you can touch and impact in your life. And if we can heal humans, we can heal society inside before we look at trying to solve our problems externally,
Sure.
we will make progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there kind of on that last note of, we talk about mainstream things quite a bit on here, and encouraging our listeners to become their own best advocates and not just believe something just because it's on a TV or a headline or whatever. Are there any sort of sources, news sources, websites that you personally advocate for or trust or, use for your own knowledge that maybe are independent, like that we could point people to that aren't CNN or Fox or whatever?
No, I watch, if I'm going to watch something or read something, try to read from each perspective, right? We know if you get Fox, you know where it's coming from, where CNN's coming from, even though each one of them thinks they're the right way. Well, I just kind of look at all of them. I read the New York Times quite often. But I think just look at patterns. Especially with this Ukrainian thing. America's been meddling around in people's business for a long time, and I don't know the last time we were in the right. We invaded Iraq. We look at that. Russia's invading Ukraine, but we did the same thing in Iraq, and we justified it, saying, "Well, weapons of mass destruction." Well, it was there. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and so I think. Yeah, I think just read everything, but it's really hard to get off our beliefs. Once people believe something, it's extremely hard to change their mind, even in the face of actual facts.
Yeah.
But I think just always, you have a duty as a citizen, as a person, to, look around a little bit and not be so damn opinionated about everything you think you know, because most of the things we just don't know.
Yep.
Right. I think it's a skill these days to be able to tell yourself and others, like, you know what? I don't have a strong opinion on that. I'm still learning before you,
Sure.
get up in arms, whether it's proverbially or literally, taking a specific stance on something before you talk to people who have been there, who have experienced it, who know firsthand, or just getting, a wide variety of facts that you can kind of like look for holes, look for, how can I use my deductive reasoning here? It can be more than one day before you really take a firm stance on something.
Yeah, right. And the hardest thing is going against your friends. You're herd, because there's like a herd mentality. We all have it, and it's like, well, my 99% of my friends believe this, and if I even counter that, you get your ass handed to you. Yep. And it's a psychological thing. People would rather go along with something they don't feel at all is true than to fight their friends over it and lose friendships.
Yeah, it's back to the identity conversation. I'm putting my identity in what other people think of me instead of how I'm showing up as my authentic self. And yeah, perfectly put. I think a great reminder for everybody, especially in the current landscape. Well, this has been such a blessing, Ed. This is awesome. I think a good time to come to a close. Where can people learn more about you and the work that you're doing? Can people get involved?
They can. Well, look at edhiner.com. You can go in there. That's the one site I have with the leadership company. The other one is myphd.me, and you can look at my story while we're doing this. You look at some of the programs. Just contact me. Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Great.
I'm always interested in people. If they know anything about education or have any ideas, or people that are in it and want to connect some dots, please do.
And are you looking for, more of people like you that want to do this? Like, are you in that stage yet, or is that further down the line?
Well, yes and no. Yes, right during the pandemic stuff, we were already expanding. We had a lot of stuff going on. Actually, my lead instructor, retired Navy SEAL also, he just found out he has stage 4 cancer, so he's fighting that. So, but yeah, we are looking for people who want to participate. And then hopefully we go national with this electronic curriculum. That's the goal. So yeah, but anybody that has any ideas or people they know, just bring it on, man.
And remind us of your books and where people can find them, because I know some we're going to want to check this out.
The first is First Fast Fearless, all literary, and then the second was Guts, Greatness Under Tremendous Stress. I think I got a couple of them in the back there on the bookshelf on the top, right beside Buddha. So look them up. I think hopefully it resonates with people.
Yeah.
Cool. Last question that we ask every guest on the Medicin Medicin podcast is all about developing and facilitating, leaning into the medicines, the real medicines of our life that help us develop our relationships to self, to God, to all the things. What for you currently feels like medicine in your life?
Family. Yeah. Doing the things I do, and writing, doing what I'm doing. I think writing has helped me a tremendous amount not that I'm a great writer but just to express yourself, and like I'd say spelunk in that cave. It's like going to cave dwelling, and you find out things you didn't really know you knew. And that to me, that's very exciting. And to put that out to the world, it'll always be out there. So yeah, I think those. And helping the kids, obviously, it helps me a lot.
Yeah.
I'm building that resume for heaven. So to speak.
I love that.
It's just at the beginning stages, by the way. It's a blank slate. No, I'm kidding. No, it's developing.
Yeah.
Work in progress.
Well, we appreciate you so much. Your work in the world and just taking the time to come share with us and all of our listeners. I know things that you talked about today, I'm sure will resonate with people. And I'm absolutely sending this episode when it comes out to my little brother. Shout out Josiah. He spent 4 years in the Army and was deployed over in Syria and, experienced some really tough things over there. Yeah. And so anytime I get to, learn from someone like you who's gone through the work and done the healing, and I think that's just invaluable. So Josiah, you're going to be getting this one.
Ed, thank you so much. So inspired by you and just grateful that you are in and on the earth in 2020.
Yeah, me too.
You are one of a kind, and I'm so glad to be connected to you, and we will continue to be an extension of you on the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, you guys, thanks for hanging with us today. Go check out Ed's website, edhiner.com. Just check the show notes, subscribe, send this episode to someone you love if it touched your life in any way. We'll talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.